Definitely not a good chapter. It's not an example of Israel's faithfulness. It's really the opposite. And you're even going to see a legacy here that's negative. Because you guys remember who was the judge we just got done talking about prior to this? Gideon. Didn't he do pretty good overall? What did Gideon do that was good?
He led his people.
He led his people, yeah? Well, led his people to what? What else did he do? Gideon, what did he do good? You guys remember how it happened?
Tore down the altars. God told him to tear down
He also destroyed idolatry where he could. That's good.
Changed his life after that.
Yes.
Before that, he was a coward hiding in the wheat press, I believe.
Yes. And then the angel appeared to him, man of valor. Exactly. So Gideon was one of the better judges. And they had victory over the Midianites who would come and take their crops after they worked all hard. With their crops, they would come and snatch them up. That's no fun, right? Imagine working all hard and then someone, it's kind of like how the government taxes you, except they just did it outright. Thank you, brother. All right. So as we look at Judges chapter 9, we're going to see one of Gideon's sons. One of Gideon's sons. And here's something to remember before we start reading Judges chapter 9. Does anybody remember? True or false? Did the Israelites ask Gideon to be their king? True or false? True, they did. And he said, no. God is your king. Sounds good. Way to go, Gideon. But then he started collecting money from them. Right? You remember that? He took their golden earrings. Said, give me that gold off your ears. He got a harem, which means he got a lot of wives plus kind of sex slaves wives, concubines. Had 70 kids. We're going to find out. Man, that's a lot of child support. Yep. He started kind of living like a king. At the end of his life, it's like he said no, but then he started living, but not like a king over all Israel, kind of more like a local ruler. You know how there's levels, right? And he was kind of like this local guy. His overall legacy was faithful, but you find out the son, not so much. At least the son we're going to talk about today, Abimelech. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to read Judges 9, and I'm going to read certain sections, and then I'll stop and we'll talk about it. And we're going to try to read this whole thing so we can understand it. And as we do this, keep in mind, God is sovereign and God is in control. These events are in here for a reason, and God is going to show his power even over this situation before we get to the end. Verse 1. Now Abimelech, the son of Jerubal, well, hold on, Vocab. I thought you said we were talking about Gideon's son. Gideon had a nickname, or another name, which was Jerubal, which I guess means Baal will contend or contend against Baal, I believe is what it means in Hebrew. But so whenever you see Jerubal, understand we are talking about Gideon. So, and the way I know that, by the way, if you're like, where did he get that from? Well, just put your eyes up real quick to 835. You guys see 835? It says Jerubal. That is Gideon. See, I'm not making it up. It's right there. So it's like his AKA, right? So we're talking about Gideon's son. Went to Shechem. And if you notice in your notes, I've actually got a picture of modern day, the ancient site of Shechem. It's on the back page. That's actually Shechem. I'm going to talk more about that later. But it's a real place. Went to Shechem to his mother's relatives and said to them, and to the whole clan of his mother's family. So notice it's not his father. It's not Gideon. It's the other side. It appears Gideon had a concubine who was a Shechemite, most likely a Canaanite. Probably not an Israelite from what the account looks like. And then you have him going over there because a lot of times these concubines wouldn't even be able to live with their man, if you want to call him that. And so they would live with their relatives. So she's in that situation. So he probably didn't really know his dad even that well. So he's going there playing on that side of the family. Now watch what he's going to say. Remember, this is like a politician's speech. Say in the ears of all the leaders of Shechem, which is better for you? So notice they always appeal, these politicians, to your own self-interest. Which is better for you? See what I'm saying? That all 70 of the sons of Jerubal rule over you, or that one rule over you? Remember also that I am your bone and your flesh. What's going on there? He's like, look, you guys wanted Gideon to be king. He kind of did, he kind of didn't. But you know, I'm his son. And isn't that how we do this in the ancient Near East? Father to son, right? I guess how the kingship goes, right? Which is nice because we don't, whatever America's flaws, we don't have that. We don't have a hereditary system. Imagine if we'd still be ruled today by George Washington's sons or something like that. Regardless of the qualifications, right? It's not the kind of system you want because it has nothing to do with your qualifications to leadership. But here Abimelech is playing on the fact that Gideon was his father. And guess what the name Abimelech means in Hebrew? It means my father is king. Now, we don't know who named Abimelech. Could have been Mama, like, well, yeah, he was. Could have been Gideon himself. Well, I'm not really a king, but then again, or maybe they're saying God is king. But it seems like Gideon is kind of saying, hey, daddy's king, you know? Because his name Abimelech means my father is king. And notice, though, a politician, and that's really what Abimelech is, except he's an old school style where he outright kill people. They always appeal to your self-interests. Don't you want your college tuition paid for? Don't you want free X, Y? Yeah, I want free. Yeah. They always appeal to get power because they know you're greedy. Well, I'm not greedy. Everyone is about their self-interest. So politicians appeal to that to get power. Not because, I'm not saying there's no good politicians. I'm saying because they want power and they know you're greedy. So it's a mutually problematic system. That's why in a democratic society, and again, not saying it's perfect, we generally get what we deserve. And the Shechemites are going to get what they deserve in this situation because guess what? They're going to be like, you know, Abimelech has a point. It's kind of a silly point. Were really 70 sons going to rule the Shechemites? No. He's creating a ludicrous scenario in the first place. Like they're going to have 70 rulers, right? And then he does what's called identity politics. Don't you want someone who is of your same ethnic group over you? Wouldn't that be best? Right? I saw a lot of people be excited when Kamala Harris became the VP. And okay, I understand. And look at the strong woman's example. But sometimes we let that fact that we're glad about that trump any issues these folks have with their leadership. And you can name other examples. Let me just say what I mean by that. Do you think, and I'm not the first person to make this point, do you think back in the day when Jezebel was the queen, the young women of Israel were like, you know, I know she's wicked and leading Israel into idolatry, but she's a woman in power, and you need to idolize that. Now, I know it's kind of controversial to say something like that, but merely because someone is like you or looks like you or in some way doesn't mean they're a good ruler automatically. It's better to be ruled over by someone who's not like you, that's just. We got to get out of the mindset of identity politics. That's exactly what he does to them, though. I'm on my mother's side. I am one of you. He is literally doing the same thing politicians do today. Do you guys see what I'm saying? Yeah. It's the same old. But does that mean he's going to be a good ruler? Heck no. You're going to find out. You're going to learn today. Verse 3, and his mother's relatives spoke all these words on his behalf in the ears of all the leaders of Shechem. He didn't even do it himself. He has what's called a street team. Hey, yo, a street team. He sends out a street team, and they come in the ears of Shechemites. They're like, yeah, that's a good point. That was their old school social media, right? They might have had some flyers, right? Shechem for king. Grab one of these hottest mixtape. Here's a sampler, right? It was kind of like that, right? You guys know what I'm talking about. You guys don't live in Chandler. You live here. And their hearts inclined to follow Abimelech. For they said, he is our brother. Notice the big reason. Well, he's going to be great. He's one of us. He's going to be great. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be fantastic. It's like, I'm part Italian. If Giuliani, he's the only one who ever had a shot. If he became president, I'd probably be somewhat excited. Hey, we finally got an Italian in there. There's never been an Italian president or vice president. You know that? We got Irish, everybody else. Never been an Italian. But doesn't mean I would like everything about Giuliani. It doesn't mean I would think he's flawless. I might celebrate for a minute, so I get it. Anyways, this is keeping it in perspective, right? And they gave him 70 pieces of silver. Oh, so they can hook him up to start his, he got a little political action committee and everything. Out of the house of Bel-Berith, they took the money from the treasury of one of their idols. Fascinating. This dude's campaign is funded by idolatry, with which Abimelech, listen to this, hired worthless and reckless fellows. He's putting his cabinet together. He hired worthless. Well, things are so different back then. The Bible's not relevant. What are you talking about? Read this. He hired worthless and reckless fellows. That's what they do now. I mean, this is tired of true human nature who followed him. These are basically mercenaries in a way. Or, you know what we call them now, right? Goons. That's what you say now, goons. You call them goons. If they were Italian, you would call them Goombas. That's what a Goomba is like, kind of that kind of guy, you know? And it's kind of messed up. Mario Brothers, you kill Goombas? It's like super racist. You have Italian on Italian crime? Mario's killing Goombas? What is this? Okay, sorry, I'm getting off a little bit here. But am I wrong? Mamma mia. And he went to his father's house at Ophrah, not Oprah, and killed his brothers, the sons of Jerubal, 70 men on one stone. Fascinating. This is some kind of ritualistic killing, either all at once in one place or one by one. Kill them all right here on this stone. Remember, he killed them on a stone. That's going to be important later. But Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubal, was left, for he hid himself. So he played a little game of hide and seek, and he managed to escape. So there's one son left. So maybe perhaps it looks like he had 71. Depends how they're counting it here. But Jotham escaped. Jotham's name means Yahweh is perfect. That's what his name means. And all the leaders of Shechem came together, and all Beth Millo, and they went and made Abimelech king by the oak of the pillar at Shechem. Verse 7. When it was told to Jotham, he went and stood on top of Mount Gerizim and cried aloud and said to them. Now, Mount Gerizim, there's these two mountains there, right, that you would have Gerizim and Ebal, and then you have this kind of dip with these prominent peaks, right? And what it did is it created a natural amphitheater. So when he would speak, a lot of people could hear him down in there because of the way the acoustics were. I know some of you guys like amphitheaters. I think Eric likes amphitheaters. Did he propose to Sierra in one? So he likes amphitheaters. Glendale Amphitheater. There's a video online. You can watch it and everything. Oh, Eric's so sweet. So this is an interesting thing because back in the day, they took the Israelites and said, here's the law. You could choose life or death. Choose life or death. And they stood on these two mountains. It was like the life side and the death side. It was telling the Israelites, if you do this, you're going to be blessed. If you do this, you're going to be cursed. So he's in that same spot. And it's like they're facing that choice again. You're going to choose life or death. Abimelech or what God wants, right? And we'll listen to this. This is one of the Bible's first and few fables. Fables. Because there's a parable. But a parable is different than a fable. And a fable is something where inanimate objects speak. They have character. They're personified. So, for example, trees or animals, right? And so he's going to tell a fable, right? Now listen to this. Listen to me, you leaders of Shechem, that God may listen to you. So he's starting hot and heavy there. The trees once went out to anoint a king over them. So right away you should understand the Shechemites, the people in the area, are the trees. And they said to the olive tree, reign over us. And again, being part Italian, everyone knows olive trees are the best. Just kidding. But the olive tree said to them, shall I leave my abundance by which gods and men are honored and go hold sway over the trees? So it's saying, the olive tree's like, I'm happy I'm doing something. You want me to go be shade for? You want me to stop producing olives and olive oil and go just be shade? Buy an umbrella, fella. No, I'm not going to leave. I'm happy. So they can't get the olive tree, which is kind of like the best one, right, in the story. And the tree said to the fig tree, you come and reign over us. But the fig tree said to them, shall I leave my sweetness and my good fruit and go hold sway over the trees? And the tree said to the vine, you come and reign over us. So notice it's decreasing here. about which one would provide more shade. Now we're all the way down to just divine, right? And by the way, part of this, and I'm going to apply it to politics, sometimes the people who would make the best politicians or leaders, they're content doing something else. They don't want to put up with it. They don't do it. So we get the people who want power a lot of times instead, who aren't the best. So it's like this decreasing order of who's actually qualified. That's what's happening in this fable. So watch when they get down to the shrubbery that's going to represent Abimelech. Watch this. Because remember, Jotham, the one living brother, is telling this fable to the Israelites. All right, verse 12. You come reign over us. But the vine said to them, shall I leave my wine that cheers God and men and go hold sway over the trees? Then all the trees said to the bramble. That's like that worthless kind of rolling kind of thorn bush kind of thing. That actually was a plague in Israel. Because you know how it happens. If it catches fire, you can lose your field. You can, because it's dry. That's the bramble doesn't provide any shade. It's the opposite. It's a scourge of the land. And yet, bramble maybe? You see how it's going, right? Fine, da-da-da-da. And listen what the bramble says to the trees in verse 15. If in good faith you are anointing me king over you, then come and take refuge in my shade. It's like, bro, you ain't got no shade to give. Politician making a false promise, telling you something he cannot even provide. He can't provide shade. He has no shade to give. You understand that? It's a false promise. But watch this. He's going to do this thing. Well, you know, since you asked me, you better, because if you don't, it's going to be the worst case scenario. If you don't elect me, here's what's going to happen. That's kind of the king he's going to kind of say. Watch this. Watch what he says here. Then come out and take refuge in my shade. But if not, let fire come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon. So let me burn up all the best of the best. So you better, or else I'm a... That's what he's saying. And guess what? Remember, this parable is prophetic by Jotham. What he says is actually going to happen. Remember that last line. Verse 16. Now therefore, this is still Jotham speaking, if you acted in good faith and integrity when you made Abimelech king, did they act in good faith and integrity? They gave him $70 out of a pagan god's house, and then he killed his brothers. These are the children of Gideon, right? So it's kind of like he's like saying this, but anyone in the crowd should be like, oh, I guess we kind of didn't, right? You know, I mean, now that I think about it. If you have dealt well with Jerubal and his house, and have done to him as his deeds deserved, for my father fought for you and risked his life and delivered you from the hand of Midian. So he's reminding them. I mean, think about it. It's like, Gideon, we love you. We're going to honor you by having all your sons murdered. Way to repay the father. And you have risen up against my father's house this day and have killed his sons, 70 men on one stone. Interesting, by the way. You guys remember Judges chapter 1? I'm going to stop there, brief detour. They caught that local Canaanite king, and they chopped off his digits, right? You know, turned him into a guy named Matt. What happened with that is he says, oh, it's okay. It's kind of fair retribution because guess what? I chopped off the fingers and toes of 70 kings too. I don't know if there's a significance, but it's interesting. That bad king they caught in the very beginning of Judges chapter 1, he also says he chopped off, it was 70 people to get where he was. And now you have Abimelech cutting down 70 of his own brothers, right? Oh man, now I got, what verse was I in? Thank you, yes! Praise God. Seriously, I got lost there for a second. It's like that big, If you have then acted in good faith and integrity with the Jerubal and with his house this day, then rejoice in Abimelech and let him also rejoice in you. You guys deserve each other. That's what he's saying there. Verse 20. But if not, let fire come out from Abimelech and devour the leaders of Shechem and Beth Millo, which is exactly what he said, right? He's saying that's going to happen if you do elect him and it ain't right. You see what I'm saying? Let fire come out from the leaders of Shechem and from Beth Millo and devour Abimelech. So you guys just, if this ain't right, you guys are going to kill each other. Mutual destruction. And Jotham ran away and fled. So he had to do his hit and run speech because he's probably like, well, hey, we got to get this one last guy, right? Probably, you know, it's like the last dude. So he's like, makes a speech and he's like, ducks out real quick. Jotham ran away and fled and went to Beer. That means he went and got a cerveza. It doesn't mean that. It's the name of a place, everybody. And lived there because the drink was good. Just kidding, it doesn't say that either. Because of Abimelech, his brother. Just seeing if you're paying attention, right? Now, verse 22 is going to be the downfall. You're like, well, hold up. How are we in the downfall? Oh, we're already in the downfall section, right? Yes, we are. We're already in the downfall section. Abimelech ruled over Israel 3 years. That's it. Imagine killing 70 of your brothers and all you get was 3 years reigning out of it. And God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the leaders of Shechem. The leaders of Shechem dealt treacherously with Abimelech, that the violence done to the 70 sons of Jerubal might come, and their blood be laid on Abimelech their brother, who killed them, and on the men of Shechem, who strengthened his hands to kill his brothers. And the leaders of Shechem put men in ambush against him on the mountaintops, and they robbed all who passed by them along the way, and it was told to Abimelech. So I'm going to stop right there. Now, you've got to interpret this somehow. Your interpretation, you can have somewhat different, but I'm going to give you what I think is the best and the valid, because 9:22 can be tough. It says God sent an evil spirit. So we're not going to be like Jotham and run away from the passage. We're going to find out, what does it mean? And you may say, well, I don't like Vocab's answer. That's okay. No one's saying you come up with something else biblical that deals with the text, and that's okay. And so you could say, well, but here's what I believe it means. And the thing is, it's not inconsistent with God's behavior in other places. And let me show you what it is, where it says God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the men of Shechem. The Hebrew word there is ra'ah, and it means bad. So it is a bad spirit, right? And the indication seems, because it says he sent. So it doesn't seem to be just like, oh, it's a bad spirit, like a bad vibe, because that's how some people kind of try to interpret along those. But it says God sent. So it seems like there's an active presence, meaning a demonic spirit. That's what it seems most likely, because it's sent by God to fulfill Jotham's curse. This demonic activity, and I'm reading from the notes here, right, because I wanted to get this part right. It aroused distrust or jealousy in the Shechemites. He sent an evil spirit to actually bring division between them, to punish them. God can even use the devil, and indeed he does. Before you say, that just doesn't sound right. King Saul, you guys remember? He was troubled and bothered by what? Hemorrhoids? No, the Bible says God sent an evil spirit to him. He might have had hemorrhoids too, I don't know. Maybe that's why he was always grumpy. And that's why David would come and play his little music on his harp, right? Remember that? And kind of chase that spirit away was the idea, and Saul would be like, okay. That's not the only time. Remember Satan in the book of Job? Now, this is not identical, but it's similar. It shows that God is he's sovereign and in control, even of the wicked spirits. Remember? You have a situation where there's the angels, and it appears that Satan is right there, and he's going to give like a report to God. God's like, hey, what you been up to, man? Tell me, walking around, doing the thing, kind of, notice because Satan has to give an account to God. I'm obviously paraphrasing. We're not going to go to Job 1, but you can see what I'm saying. And Satan doesn't say, hey, you got anybody I can mess with? God says to Satan, have you noticed my servant Job? Some of you guys let me be righteous, Lord, but not so righteous that God brings up my name to Satan as a candidate for torture. Right? It's like, oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I've seen Job around the way. The thing with Job is he just likes you because you got him hooked up, bro. I mean, he's living his best life now. He's living the Joel Osteen prosperity gospel. His teeth are perfect. I mean, look at him. You know what I'm saying? He goes first class on all the camels. Look at him. God's like, oh, you think, okay. You can go ahead and do whatever you want. Just don't touch his body. Satan is like, he wastes no time. Within an hour, Job loses everything. Satan is super fast. It's if you read the account, it is literally one thing upon another. Oh, my refrigerator broke today. My car battery went. That's enough to depress me for a day. 2 things like that. Job lost his house, his family, everything, his livestock, everything like that. In America, the stock market goes down. People jump out of windows. Job tears his clothes. Is like, dang. Right? Satan comes back. Well, you didn't let me give him disease. So he's moving. It's called moving the goalposts, right? God's like, okay, you can't kill him, but you can go ahead and afflict his body. Job immediately, he He goes from Arnold Schwarzenegger to Pee Wee Herman or something like that. I don't know the reference, right? Or better yet, from Twins, he goes from Arnold to Danny DeVito. Some of you guys are like, what are you talking about, bro? That's all right. Overnight. And yet, he's faithful. He's not perfect, because he's a human, but he's faithful. God is doing this, and then at the end, God comes at the end of the book of Job and never really tells Job why. If you read it, he doesn't say, well, see, I was going to have this be like a story, so when people suffer later on, they'll look to this for inspiration, or don't worry, you haven't read the last chapter, I'm going to hook you up again. He doesn't say, he says, where were you when I created this? Where were you when he's saying, Job, you have no wisdom, you don't know anything. That's very humbling. Some of you, I don't like that. That's what God said. The Bible says he vexed Job and the whirlwind. If you've been going through your whole life and you think of God as a kind of kindly hunched over old man, with a white beard, right? And he's like, oh, those kids out there playing in the yard, he never spanks anybody. That's not God of the Bible. It never was. He is to be feared, but he's to be loved. Look at the cross. So you see the situation where God's like, this isn't right. I'm going to send an evil spirit. So this is good, though, because you understand even the demons are ultimately under God's control. And that's important to remember. Now, look, this gets into concepts that people aren't always comfortable with, but I think are biblical. One called sovereignty. And I'm going to read this. I'm going to read this. I'm not going to read the rest of the notes like this, but I'm going to read this part, okay? God used an evil spirit to replace the harmony between Abimelech and the citizens of Shechem with distrust and disagreement. That God would send an evil spirit, a demon, shows that he sovereignly rules over all the universe. Even Satan could not attack Job without God's permission, what I just referenced. And evil powers are subject to his control. That reference there is to the Saul account I mentioned. So you have the verse references right there. This shows God's sovereignty, an important concept, but a hard to spell word. God's possession of ultimate authority and power. Sovereignty is a characteristic of the all-powerful, all-knowing Creator. He governs the universe for his own purposes. He even saved you for his own purposes. I thought he saved you because I was so spiritual and cute. No, he saved you because for his own reasons and purposes. Read Ephesians 1 and read Ephesians 2. It doesn't say because you were so epic. It says because God wanted to do this. He loves you before the foundation of the world. Again, some people will like this and they rejoice in the fact that God's in control. Other people, it's hard to handle. And you got to work through these things. And it doesn't always answer every question because then you're like, well, if God's really in control, what about this over here? It's a real thing we got to deal with. But it's first important to understand who God is and not make him in our own image, right? This also deals with something called God's providence. You don't hear that word every day. But you know there's a place called Providence, Rhode Island? I don't know, you guys probably never been back east. A couple of us have, right? I haven't been really to the Northeast, but I've been over there a little bit. They named it for a reason. Providence was very important to the early Puritan Christians. They saw God's hand everywhere. If you read the account of Plymouth Colony, for example, written by the governor, William Bradford, he's constantly talking about God's providence and the things that happened to the pilgrims. He viewed it as God's working in their everyday lives, right? And again, this is not to say the pilgrims are perfect either. Someone's going to say, yeah, but the pilgrims did this. And I know, but they understood God's providence, and that's important. That's his loving care and governance that he exercises over the created universe. The biblical picture of God's providence is that he's omniscient, he's omnipotent, he's a perfectly good being, has exhaustive knowledge, that means complete or total knowledge of the past, present, and future, and the simultaneous, by the way, and exercises his power to ensure that every event is part of his perfect plan, even what demons and even Satan himself does. Now, wrestle with that, but we got to move to the next part. We are now in Judges, chapter 9, verses 26 and 27. And Gaal, the son of Ebed, moved into Shechem with his relatives. So newcomer comes to town, right? All right, now watch this. And the leaders of Shechem put confidence in him. So Shechem's like, hey, this guy's all right too. This new guy, he's doing all right, okay. And they went out into the field and gathered the grapes from their vineyards and trod them and held a festival. Now, if you look in your notes, I'll talk a little about this. This is a pagan festival. This is something the Canaanites did. The Canaanites are the people around them who are idolaters. And that's why, as harsh as it may sound, God said to Joshua, you got to wipe these folks out because they're going to be a snare to you. I want you to judge them by my hand through this conquest and these wars, because if you don't, this is what's going to happen. And guess what? That's exactly what happened. So you now got Israelites living like Canaanites, right? And it's hard to tell who's who in this passage. They're even celebrating their crazy festivals and feasts, right? All right, Providence in him. And they went out in the field and gathered the grapes from their vineyard and trod them and held a festival. It's not a biblical festival. And they went to the house of their God and ate and drank and reviled Abimelech. So they go to their little temple, right? And it doubles as a bar. So, right, you see, they go in the house of God and get drunk. They're like, hey! Imagine if you came to every Sunday morning while Gabe was preaching. Hey! Get another one, right? And by the end of the service, everyone's like, hey, man. And that was a good. And guess what? When people get drunk, they start talking crap. Liquid courage. That's what it's called. Well, there's about to be a man who's about to have some liquid courage here, right? And look at it. Listen to what he says. And Gaul, the son of Ebed. Okay, where to go? All right. And Gaul, the son of Ebed, said, "Who is Abimelech? And who are we of Shechem that we should serve him?" If you could imagine you could make a curse word version of this, of how people talk. The Bible's so weird. No, it's the same. That's what people still. Oh, who is that? I don't know who that is. Who? You see what I'm saying? That's exactly. I don't even know who you are. He's saying that kind of thing. So he's like kind of a new leader trying to rise to power, and he's like, "Who is this guy over us?" Right? So he's getting his liquid courage. Is what he's saying, right? Look what he says. Is he not the son of Jerubal? And is not Zebul his officer? Oh, but I thought he was one of us. But now he's saying, well, his dad's not really one of us. You see what I'm saying? He's playing on the fact that his dad was Gideon, an Israelite. And it appears perhaps some of the people we speak it to might have been Shechemites or Canaanites. But it's hard to tell, again, in this count who's who, because you're going to see at the end, they're referred to as Israelites. So it's like they're basically blending in. There's like no difference between them and the pagan neighbors and the way that they live, right? So it's like, why should we? He's not really one of us. He's he's a half-breed. That's what he's saying, right? Serve the men of Hamor, the father of Shechem. But why should we serve him? Let's keep it local, he's saying. Would that this people were under my hand? Oh, I do so much better. Ha! This is the same thing Abimelech did in the beginning, remember? It always goes like this, right? Then I would remove Abimelech. I would say to Abimelech, increase your army and come out. He's saying, if I was in charge, look, I would be like, hey, Abimelech, you better get your army, step up your game, and come out and meet me. He's saying, like, increase your army, then let's fight, right? So that's the liquid courage story. But now watch verse 30, though. And remember, God's in control of this. Even that, God designed that to punish what had happened because of great wickedness had occurred, right? So it's showing even in the midst of this craziness, God's in control. When Zebul, the ruler of the city, heard the words of Gaul, the son of Ebed, his anger was kindled. Oh, are you going to talk about me that way? And he sent messengers to Abimelech secretly. So, you ever had that friend, you run off with their mouth, and they're like, yeah, and then they tell the friend what you said, but they're chilling in the meantime, but they're secretly wondering, like, are they going to get them? That is that friend. Zebul's going to hang out with Gaul, but he's going to also tell Abimelech, hey, you know what he said about you? Again, human nature has not changed, has it? And he sent messengers to Abimelech secretly saying, behold, Gaul, the son of Ebed, and his relatives have come to Shechem, and they are stirring up the city against you. Now, therefore, go by night. So he's like, let me tell you what to do, right? A piece of advice, Abimelech. You and the people who are with you, and set an ambush in the field. Then in the morning, as soon as the sun is up, rise early and rush upon the city. And when he and the people who are with him come out against you, you may do to them as your hand finds to do. So he's like, hey, man, here's what he's saying. And you know what I would do? If I was you, here's what I would do. He's literally doing that. He is that kind of friend to him. So Abimelech and all the men who were with him arose up by night and set an ambush against Shechem and 4 companies. Shechem is the place that got him king in the first place. You guys see that? So again, this also shows another thing, because you're about to have some Israelite on Israelite violence. No matter who's in charge, you still have Israelite and Israelite violence. David is in charge later on, and guess what? You have Israelite on Israelite violence when David, the best king, is in charge. It doesn't mean it's good, but it means if you hear someone say, I'll bring unity and you won't have any more of this, and no. You'll still have it if the parts of the people aren't in the right place. So it doesn't matter who's in charge. If he's one of you or not, you'll still have Israelite on Israelite violence, right? Because you can see how in some ways we're seeing this perhaps in the good old US of A. Now watch this. Gaul, the son of Ebed, so this guy who's talking trash, right? went out and stood at the entrance of the gate of the city. He's like, hey, I'm about to take this place over, look at my land, right? And Abimelech and the people who were with him rose from the ambush, creeping on the come up, right? And when Gaul saw the people, he said to Zebul, hey, look, there's people that are coming down from the mountaintops. He's like, hey, do you see? It looks like, right? He's telling the guy who told on him. So the guy knows there's about to be a squab. He knows, right? Watch what he says, though. Zebul said to him, oh, you mistake the shadow of the mountains for men. Your mind's playing tricks on you, bro. You're seeing things. It's your imagination, kid. But he knows what it is. Gaul spoke again and said, look, people are coming from the direction of the diviner's oak. Then Zebul said to him, so he's like, okay, the gig is up. Watch this. Where's your mouth now? What do people say now? Where's that issue is talking? That's what they say, right? That's what he's saying. It is, again, literally the same thing. So he's like, oh, where was this you were talking about before? Because remember, he name dropped him too. He's like, oh, isn't he his like right-hand man? So he took that personal like Michael Jordan. Who was Abimelech? He's saying, didn't you say this? Let me remind you what you said with your drunken stupor. Where's your mouth now who said, who's Abimelech that we should serve him? Are not these the people whom you despised? Go out now and fight with them. He's like, what did you hate? And you said you want to fight, and there they are. Go ahead. It's like, well, I'm not ready. Not now. Well, that's how they do. They're not going to tell you when they're coming. And Gaul went out at the head of the leaders of Shechem and fought with Abimelech. So he did it. But come on, man. And Abimelech chased him, and he fled before him. And many fell wounded up to the entrance of the gate. And Abimelech lived at Ramoth, and Zebul drove out Gaul and his relatives so that now they could not dwell at Shechem. So basically, Gaul is gone, the guy was talking the trash, and now his family can't even live at Shechem. And so now they're kind of like, okay, I'm going to really take charge. But that's not the end of the story, is it? On the following day, the people went out into the field, and Abimelech was told. He took his people and divided them into 3 companies and set an ambush in the fields. And he looked and saw the people coming out of the city. So he rose against them and killed them. Because you might think, okay, Abimelech's like, okay, I dealt with that dude. It's cool. He's like, no. You turned your backs on me. I'm going to take care of this town. And again, this is the kind of thing that still happens. The leader of Syria, Assad, his father, who came to power, I think, in Syria like in the 60s, he destroyed his whole hometown because they didn't agree with him on some political issue. And I think like 35,000 people were wiped out from Assad's father. This kind of thing still happens. And so that's exactly what's going to happen here, right? So this is the behavior of ancient Near Eastern kings. They're acting like Canaanite kings here, right? So he's like, it's going to get worse. It's not over. So he rose against them and killed them. Abimelech and the company that was with him rushed forward and stood at the entrance of the gate of the city, while the 2 companies rushed upon all who were in the field and killed them. So this is indiscriminate slaughter at this point. And Abimelech fought against the city all that day. He captured the city and killed the people who were in it, and he razed, that means burned to the ground. That's what razed means, that word. Razed the city and sowed it with salt. That was a symbolic gesture to say you can't ever grow any crops here. It's going to be barren forever. Is why they would salt the field after they destroy the people. When all the leaders of the tower of Shechem heard it, they entered the stronghold of the house of El-Berith. So it's like, let's go where our God is, right? And El-Berith means like the Lord of the covenant. Abimelech was told that all the leaders of the tower of Shechem were gathered together. So it's like, when you run into a Catholic church, sanctuary. That's the kind of thing they're doing, right? It's like, no, bro. And Abimelech went up to Mount Zalman, and he and all the people who were with him. And Abimelech took an axe in his hand and cut down a bundle of brushwood and took it up and laid it on his shoulder. Remember in the beginning, he's the bramble? Now he cuts basically some bramble and puts it on his shoulder. So he's like, hey, watch what I do, guys. Now watch what he's going to do here. And he said to the men who were with him, what you have seen me do, hurry and do as I have done. So every one of the people cut down his bundle, and following Abimelech, put it against the stronghold. So he set all these kind of brush, these kind of like worthless, weed kind of brushes against the tower that they're in. Now watch this. Abimelech put it against the stronghold, and they set the stronghold on fire over them, so that all the people of the tower of Shechem died, and about 1,000 men and women. He just killed them all, burned them to death, just like Jotham said. Then Abimelech went to Thebes and encamped against Thebes and captured it. So he's like, you know what? I'm gonna increase my territory while I'm at it, right? But there was a strong tower within the city. So he's like, oh, another tower to take care of. Well, I know what to do with that. And all the men and women and all the leaders of the city fled to it and shut themselves in. Sounds like what just happened, doesn't it? But it's not going to end the same. And they went up to the roof of the tower. And Abimelech came to the tower and fought against it and drew near to the door of the tower to burn it with fire. He's like, I had this tactic at work last time. Let's do it again. So, see what he's doing here? All right? And a certain woman threw an upper millstone above Abimelech's head and crushed his skull. And he had a splitting headache. Check this out. We have a millstone. It's like this big one. Bottom one's like this grindstone kind of thing. And you would put like the stuff in between it. And you would grind it to get it fine. But the top one was smaller enough that it was heavy. It had size to it. But you could carry it under your arm. It's something you could carry around with you. The top piece to the millstone, right? So a lady has one of those, right? She's, it's like when you get hit in the head with a pot or a pan by a lady in a movie. It's like that kind of thing, It's like that, or they become masters of, with brooms and shoes and stuff. Well, she's got a millstone, right? And this lady had some kind of aim, right? Or something else. God is sovereignly guiding this millstone. Maybe a little bit of both. Who knows what she did in high school, right? So she's got this millstone. She's like, oh, that's the guy about to burn us all down? Well, I got an idea. 1 in 1,000 shot. He's not dead, but he knows he's about to die. He's like, old cartoon with stars and stuff, all that's going on, but he knows it's like his last breath. It's an unnamed lady. How many ladies are going to be killing wicked people in this book? You guys remember Sisera with the...
Nailed it.
Yeah, through the temple?
Nailed it.
Yeah, she nailed it like Martin Luther, right? I think he's on my shirt somewhere. But, so this lady... Right, this is a dude that's killing everybody, and notice, what did he kill his 70 brothers on? On a stone. It's not an accident. It's not me being corny. It's God's retribution. Oh, you killed your 70 brothers on this one stone? You decide you're going to die that same way, with a stone to the head, right? Now watch this. Then he called quickly to the young man, his armor bearer, and said to him, draw your sword and kill me, just like Saul did. Remember that? Lest they say of me, a woman killed him. He's like, I can't go out like that, man. So now we don't know how he was really killed. It's in the Bible. Everybody knows. It was a woman with a millstone. It's like, sorry, dude. You could have made it. He might have still been alive today if he didn't do that. Who knows, right? And his young man thrust him through, and he died. He's like, I got your back. And when the men of Israel saw that Abimelech was dead, and remember as I said, it's going to sound like Canaanites the whole time, but they're never referred to Canaanites. But then at the end it says the men of Israel. So they have become thoroughly Canaanized in every way. Because look who it is in verse 55. When the men of Israel saw Abimelech was dead, everyone departed to his home. So it's like, well, it's destruction. Killed a couple towns, killed a bunch of, killed off the family of Gideon, and going to go back to doing what I was doing before. It's really all of this for nothing, just a judgment on Israel. Because they put their faith in wicked leaders instead of God. Verse 56. In case you missed it, the author spells it out. Thus God returned the evil of Abimelech, which he committed against his father, and killing his 70 brothers. And God also made all the evil of the men of Shechem return on their heads, and upon the men the curse of Jotham, the son of Jerubal. Now, we don't have time to go over it, but I have a little section here where it says Judges 9:42 through 49. I have a little section on archaeological notes. I'm not going to do that here. The reason why I bring these things up when I have these little things about the archaeology of some of the places we get in Israel, because I want you to remember how real this is. It doesn't mean that we've discovered every place in the Bible, okay? There's still places we don't know about. But we found a lot, and they confirm a lot of what we talk about. And I've even given a link to a website on the bottom. It's a biblical archaeology site that tells more about Shechem and how archaeology has confirmed a lot of what we see in the Bible about the place of Shechem. So I'll just bring that out as sort of in a point for you to understand this is not a comic book. This is real, and it really happened. And I know we're all just kind of middle class going through our life, and I have not been, but this reminded me to remind you, consider going to Israel. consider trying to link up with somebody. And I've never been, so it's a But I'm saying it's a time to remind you. Has anyone been in here?
I have a friend that does tours out there. He lives up there.
Got to hook it up. Got to hook it up. It brings a lot to life in the scriptures. And remind you, this is not a fairy tale, ladies and gentlemen. This really happened, right? And so I just bring that point out. So that's for you to look at, as well as the last note is as well. But here's the thing. The human heart wants to be led. We act like we're so independent, but at the end of the day, we really want a leader. And we look a lot of times to leaders as if they're really going to solve all of our problems. But they're not, they can't, and they won't. And so we've got these bad wannabe kings who just use you up and then bring destruction on your head. And that still happens all over the world, not just in America. It is really worse in other places because there's less checks and balances, right? As bad as whatever you think it is, it's way, way worse. And it's going to happen till the Lord comes back. And that's why it doesn't mean you're not politically involved. I hope you didn't get, I'm just saying we recognize human nature. Whatever your political theory, and today's not about politics, it's ultimately about Jesus. He's the leader, right? That's what I'm saying here. Whatever your politics, it's important to go forward in politics, recognizing the wickedness and the selfishness and the greed of the human heart, not thinking that men and women are angels. If you have a political theory that's based upon the idea that people are basically good, you'll go astray in your political theory. That's why communism has never worked. We won't just mutually share unless there's a self-interest for us. That's why communism, socialism have not worked. That's why Marxism has not worked. Because it's based upon a false understanding of who we are. That's why you want a system that limits power and has checks and balances, because you recognize the wickedness and evil of the human heart. Vote that way, understand that way, process things that way. It doesn't mean you think you're good and they're not. We're all equally bad. Now, the Lord's supposed to redeem us, so we're supposed to look different, right? Not be canonized, but at the same time, have a real view of these things. But then at the same time, realize it's never the ultimate solution. The guy gets 4 years, maybe he gets 8 years. Okay. Jesus is going to have an eternal reign. The question is right now, is he ruling and reigning in your heart? The way you know that is by what we do and don't do. And there's ways we recognize we still rebel against him. We're believers, but we have the struggle. The Bible says, put on the new person, right? Put on the new man, put on the new woman. And so we have to constantly remember, Jesus is Lord over my life. So if the Bible tells you to do something, then do it. If you know there's a right thing to do, then do it. If you know there's a wrong thing, I know it sounds simple, but that's the sign that Jesus is king. He's the real ultimate Lord over your life. Not even always your self-interest, because there's things that the Lord wants you to do that may not seem like they are in your best interest. And your family might say, what's wrong? You're stupid. Why are you doing this? Why are you working less hours? Why are you not? Because, and it's because what the Lord is telling you to do. You guys know what I'm talking about, because you all have these kind of crossroads in your own life that you have to face. And so we can look at them and be like, dang, those people were stupid. Yeah, but where are you at? How is God your king in your life? That's the challenge we leave today. And we look forward to Christ's rule and reign. Won't it be beautiful when Jesus cracks the sky, comes back on a white horse, wipes out wicked kingdoms, sets up a perfect kingdom, dries every eye, dries every tear. There's no more injustice. No cops are going to kill anybody. You won't even need cops. I'm not saying there's not going to be cops in heaven. There'll be saved cops in heaven. Pastor Gabe's friend, for example, I think he'll be there, right? He's a believer. Is he a believer? Your buddy? Is your buddy the cop a believer?
Yes, he is.
Okay, well, hopefully we'll see that brother there, right? And it'll be a beautiful thing. So we look forward to that, but then while we're here, try to establish the kingdom of God on earth. So we're not like Abimelech and those Canaanites, and we're more like people who are serving him.